Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, July 22nd, 2019. Time for yet another week. Shows. Daily Kos Radio is live now. We are reliably informed from, are you still broiling hot up there in Portland, Maine? Bill lets us know after reporting to us all weekend on how his squirrels are doing. Daily Kos Radio is live now. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. Temperatures are better here, by the way. Bids you a warm welcome, not too warm, to the 132nd consecutive Infrastructure for Everybody but the Coastal Elites week. Excellent start, I think so. You may have noticed over the weekend a few people tweeting around screenshots of one of Trump World's latest fundraising screeds through their email list, in which he insisted he was looking for support to fight the coastal elites, which he is definitely not one of, because billionaire and everything golden. And so we also have the photographic evidence to prove it, widely shared, as it turns out. Very popular to share those crazy pictures of him in his golden palace, saying he needs your money, of all things, to fight the coastal elite. Remember when it was a great idea to run Trump for president because he was a bazillionaire and he could pay for the whole thing and he could just save America single-handedly? Yeah. I remember Ross Perot sort of did the same thing there too. You know, I can do this because I'm a billionaire, and then they don't actually. Well, anyway, it's pretty weird, and they don't deliver on much of anything. They haven't built any wall. I saw that actually tweeted out yesterday by the Washington Examiner, which is amazing. So I'm wondering when we're going to be deporting them and declaring them enemies of the people. But it was a little unusual for them because they are a conservative outlet and usually spend their time saying otherwise, but, a little something for everybody, I guess, in this weekend. It was extraordinarily hot, but hopefully where you are, the weather is finally breaking today. We had a rainstorm yesterday that cooled it down, I think, something like 30 degrees inside of an hour or something. I'm surprised more things aren't breaking this way, but anyway, the weather appears to be letting up a little bit, and I enjoyed the weekend's Twitter activity of, let's see, we saw, as I mentioned, Bill's squirrels draped over branches, dying of the heat. I hope they made it through the weekend. Let's see, did you see the moose and the sprinkler one? Yeah, that was pretty interesting too. So all the wildlife taking advantage of any of the water sources, I guess, that they could. And, it was interesting, to say the least. It got to be about 100 and something degrees with a little heat and humidity thrown in there here in the Washington, D.C. area. I left the house. That was a terrible mistake. I went out on Saturday night down to the National Mall, which, by the way, worst mall I ever saw. I give it 0 stars because there's 0. Did you know there's 0 stores in this? Note to self, fix this in my second term. Anyway, down at the National Mall for the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing, and very interesting and innovative program put on there. Maybe you saw it, at least saw it mentioned on the news that they managed to project a great image of the Apollo rockets, the Apollo 11's rockets, which I guess is it? I don't even remember the name of the actual rocket booster system that they were using. But watch the launch projected against the Washington Monument. Very clever use of screens there. You don't have to put up a giant screen or IMAX screen or anything like that. You can just project it right on the Washington Monument, perfectly shaped for it. All sorts of other screens around on the mall for watching other info and footage of the mission. Very interesting. Super crowded. And it was also 100 degrees, and so we all huddled together and made it even hotter. But the good thing about being around that many people is the mosquitoes have too many other choices for a bite to eat, and I managed to get out of there without mosquito bites. That was pretty good. It was damn crowded. It was damn hot. And it was great because I think the president left the city for the weekend and went up to New Jersey, where it was only slightly less warm. And I don't know whether he dragged his butt around the golf course or not, but I think he was up there for a visit to his mausoleum site, getting ready to move in. You know, sooner rather than later would be okay with us. Anyway, Greg Dworkin is here and has collected the stories of the weekend. There are many to get to. There are many suggestions from many of you as well, and I bet we're going to run through about half of them right here, right now. All right. Hey, good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good morning. So it hasn't quite broken here yet.
Oh, damn it. Right.
It's in the high 70s, on the way up to the 80s, but we're going to get some thunderstorms later today, and maybe that'll do it.
Okay.
Hey, that was the Saturn V rocket.
Saturn
the
V,
only rocket that anybody knows. It's Saturn V.
Yeah, I've been watching a couple. They've been playing all sorts of space movies, and now I'm like, well, wait a minute. They tried all these other rockets, but then there was this one, and then this one was for missiles, and that didn't work, and they tried another. Saturn is the one, right?
Saturn V, Saturn V, right? Yeah. Everybody remembers that one. And you know who really liked the display?
Rocket boosters and what?
You know who really liked the display on the Washington Monument?
No, I don't know.
Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin loved it.
I'm surprised nobody has contaminated. I mean, you get punched, but if nobody.
Well, he did a great job punching somebody in the face.
Yeah,
who
fake
accused
news,
him of
fake
lying
news.
and being a coward about lying about the moon landing.
Although
I do see this follow-up. The conspiracy theorist punched by Buzz Aldrin still thinks the moon landing was a fake. Probably thinks that punch was a fake.
Yeah,
too.
right. Yeah, fake punch. You could just say, can you punch him and then tell him it was fake news?
My nose hurts,
Like if he tries to prosecute. Real. I'll have the cops arrest you. Why? It was fake news. I didn't punch you.
I'm not advocating punching conspiracy theorists. I'm simply saying it happened.
And I'm not joining him. I'm not concurring in that, which is not a conspiracy.
Right, I suppose.
So, there you go.
So speaking of things that aren't a conspiracy, one of the things that isn't a conspiracy is Robert Mueller testifying in Congress this Wednesday, I guess.
I think that is a conspiracy.
And that's going to be some must-watch TV, I think. Mark Murray kindly summarizes and says, it's almost Mueller time, but here's a refresher on what's in the full 448 pages that nobody's ever going to read. Okay? Five things. The Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election, with the Russians believing they'd benefit from a Trump presidency, and with the Trump campaign expecting it would benefit electorally from Russian efforts. Yes. That's a known fact.
Oh, all right.
The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities, but the fact that the Russians interfered established. Now, the investigation did establish that several individuals affiliated with the Trump campaign lied to Mueller and Congress, harming the investigation. As a matter of fact, Trump's on Twitter today making disparaging remarks about Mueller, which all the attorneys are saying that's kind of like witness tampering in plain view. Trump took numerous actions, asking his White House counsel to remove Mueller, firing FBI Director James Comey, not telling the truth about the 2016 Trump Tower meeting that were meant to impede the investigation. Mm-hmm. And the investigation did not conclude Trump committed a crime of obstruction, but it also didn't exonerate him.
Yeah.
That's what's basically in the Mueller report. Is that news to people? It's not news to us. The question is going to be whether it's news to everybody else. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes.
And so, the whole problem here is a little bit of a communication thing. It's on a related but not same topic. There's this interesting piece in Mother Jones today entitled, How Do You Make Sure a Climate Debate Would Slay? A former Buffy writer has ideas.
Okay.
In other words, you have to make it interesting.
By being a Buffy writer.
You say these debates need better writers. What does it mean? Well, the reason that for so many of us comedy, like John Oliver, is becoming the news is because they're just better communicators.
All right.
Right? And people who are bad communicators apparently tend to run for Congress.
Oh.
And so they do a terrible job of just sound bites and stuff like that. One thing Trump is good at,
rats,
because he deals with everything at a 4th or 5th grade level, is small sound bites that are, they fit on a bumper sticker. Very good at that.
Yes, especially if you eliminate the words he repeats.
Yeah. The thing is that, part of the problem with our media is that in normalizing Trump, they have done just a terrible, terrible job in telling people the truth.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to do it yourself, which is kind of an uphill battle. Sometimes you do it through comedy. For example, McSweeney's has a piece this week. I am against identity politics, by which I mean I'm in favor of white identity politics.
That sounds like regular news.
You should just say it. I believe everybody deserves a fair shot in life once people who already have a bunch of advantages are given a few extra fair shots in life. I believe in kindness, decency, and treating your neighbors with respect unless they might cause property values to go down. I believe that politicians should be accountable to certain kinds of people. And I believe when it comes down to it, we all have similar hopes, fears, and dreams, and it's our job to support each other's dreams unless it makes us uncomfortable or requires courage. So basically, that's what you're seeing this week. The whole week has been American reaction to Trump's racist tweets. And by that I mean, firstly, Trump's a racist.
Yes, well, true.
And he tweets racist things. And the media has had an incredible amount of difficulty struggling with that. It took the Washington Post a couple of days, but they finally got around to putting racist in just about every story in the headline that involves Trump, whereas, let's say, the New York Times has a lot more difficulty. They don't call it racist, they call it white anxiety. Or racially inflamed or racially, flavored or they find all these euphemisms.
Yeah.
And they can't just come up with the idea that, by the way, the whole problem here is the racist stuff. So two things on that. One from Jay Rosen, and the other from Tim Wise. Jay Rosen, of course, is a journalism professor, media critic. And he writes, here's how the LA Times put it on July 14th. We shouldn't rise to his bait, but how could we not? If we ignore him, we normalize his reckless behavior, and that's even worse. And so he says, welcome to my new thread where I try to solve this problem. Okay, here's another one. Julia Ioffe notes, the fundamental problem of Trump, he provokes by saying horrific things that can't go unchallenged, but in challenging them, you rev up him and his base to double down in delight and sincere belief and horrify you more, which means you have to challenge it again, rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So, on the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell, Ezra Klein said, I don't know if it's strategy, but it's certainly at this point intuition that if he loses control of the conversation, he can always say something outrageous, something offensive, and then it's at least back along the divisive lines he prefers arguing around. The point is not that it's a strategy or even that it's wise, but he's figured out that there's this hack of just acting outrageously and offensively. And all of them, Ioffe, Ezra Klein, the LA Times editors, are pointing to a problem, Jay Rosen writes, with a common piece of advice given to journalists about how to cover Trump. The advice is don't take the bait. Have you not said that to our press? I know I have. Don't let him control the news agenda. Don't let him change the subject with methods that should be familiar by now. Outrageous stunts, offensive remarks, tradition-busting behavior. He's like a toddler who wants attention. Ignore him, says this advice. The problem with ignore him is that when it's the president of the United States indulging in it, behavior we might recognize as infantile can have huge effects beyond the manipulation of our domestic news cycle. And journalists can't ignore his acting out when it may have geopolitical consequences or trigger suffering in real people, even when they know that Trump's latest outrage may be a ploy. The problem is real, not just a matter of spine. If the president decides it's okay to say some of his fellow Americans go back where you came from, or to advise elected members of Congress to leave the country if they have complaints about it, by what defensible code can journalists decline to share with their public these surprising, disturbing, and consequential facts?
You
have to cover it.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
They have to report it because with the American executive, it is often true that words are actions. If journalists took the advice never to take the bait, they'd often be taking a holiday from their most basic responsibility to say what happened. But that's not the end of the story.
Well, okay, good, because it does make sense as the end.
So far, well, that's where we're at so far. We can do better than the mournful ask of the LA Times. We shouldn't rise to the bait, but how could you not? If you ignore him, you normalize the behavior. So take the bait or normalize Trump. Those are not the only choices. Here are some options I think national newsrooms have. One, suspend normal relations with the Trump government. Something he said a long time ago. He used to say, don't go to the press conferences, send the interns. Now there aren't any, so that's like not a problem anymore.
Oh, and no interns either.
Each newsroom has to start asking, what game do we stop participating in with this government? For CNN, for example, never going live to a Trump campaign event on the grounds you'll inevitably broadcast falsehoods would be a plausible start. Take the bait or normalize the toddler, not the only choices. Just suspend normal relations.
That one.
Do it on tape delay. Just do the snippets you want to with a chance to comment on them. Do a truth sandwich around them. I mean, these are things you could do. If you don't want to take the bait, but you feel you can ignore Rosen rights and by ignoring accept his behavior, then a distinction worth making is between coverage in which Trump is the protagonist and coverage where his actions are reported, but he's not the main character.
Okay.
A producer and correspondent at Vice News, Antonia Hilton, writes, Trump as a protagonist BS coverage, where his actions are reported, but he is not the main character, informs so much of our team's immigration coverage. We spend way more time with immigrants and lawyers and in courtrooms than we do circling his orbit, and it's paid off. So they think they do it right.
Okay. I'm glad they think so.
Versus coverage. The truth sandwich is third on my list of choice newsrooms. First you say what it is, only then you report the lie, and then you repeat what's actually the case. Right, you call it something else, but,
Okay.
It's a wish sandwich, it's a truth sandwich, it's whatever you call it. Number 4 on the list of choices newsroom have beyond take the bait or ignore the toddler is to recognize that sometimes the news he made today is meant only to bring opacity to news he made yesterday. Right? For example, claims that he tried to push back against Senderback. Obvious BS. Okay, right. Treat it as such.
Well, yes, and then he undid that again anyway, so.
Right? People knew what the Spotlight team was for at Boston Globe and sent things to it. They'll learn what the Gaslight desk is for and refer things to it. I mean, it's like Daniel Dale. Yeah. Right? Everybody knows Daniel Dale now because he reports on lies. 5th on my choice list, beyond taking the bait or ignore the toddler, is to anchor 2020 coverage in a transparent and public agenda that derives from a creative act of listening. You have to know what your community wants the campaign to be about. Newsrooms of America, you can't keep them getting sucked into Trump's agenda without a firm grasp of your own. What is that agenda? Where does it come from? It can't come from journalists. Who cares what they think? It has to originate with the voters you're trying to inform. So, for example, suspend normal relations. Try it this way. His actions are reported, but he's not the main character. Move the truth sandwich up on your menu. Open a Gaslight desk and anchor your journalism in a citizen's agenda. No, you shouldn't rise to his bait, but that doesn't mean you can ignore him either. Journalists need more agile and creative options between the two, and that's why somebody like John Oliver does such a good job.
Yes. Well, he does.
So I thought that was pretty good.
I think so. This was a weekend marked by interesting and excellent threads about what the hell to do about this guy.
Yeah, I got another one on that too.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, the news media has to recognize that Trump is a racist and call him such. I mean, it's not controversial. He's been this way his entire life. Multiple examples going back to the Central Park Five. Everybody from New York knows this. Mm-hmm. Why it's so difficult for them to say is odd, because years ago, when you go back to George Wallace coverage, there was no problem saying that something was racist or it was, aimed at racist. There's none of this racially infused stuff or a thing that Democrats might call racist. Or many of the other weasel words that people use to try to avoid that. Racist, say so. Just you don't have to get all upset about it. Just say it. Just tell the truth. That's all. Trump made a racist statement, and here's the response. And don't agonize over using the word. Okay. Washington Post gotten much better about this. New York Times isn't there yet.
Yeah, it may take a while.
So Tim Wise.
Yeah,
we'll talk about Tim Wise.
Circulated probably something close to 1 million times.
Yeah, 15,000 at least here.
Okay, that's close.
If the Democrats blow this election, he says, it will not be because they were too far left on policy or because they weren't left enough. It'll have little to do with policy at all. They're making a mistake caused by traditional consultant theory that doesn't apply here. And by listening to influential pundits and liberal media who also don't get the unique nature of Trumpism, relative to normal political movements. This election is not going to be won by talking about your great plans for healthcare, jobs, and education. And the reasons are several. Let me begin by saying I have experienced, Tim Wise does, confronting the kind of phenomenon we see in Trumpism, and far more than most. As any of us who were involved in the fight against David Duke in Louisiana in 1991 know what this is and how it must be fought. So before explaining what the Dems are doing wrong, a little history.
Okay.
1990, white supremacist David Duke ran for U.S. Senate. Note how you call him a white supremacist right up front.
Yes. All right.
Ran for U.S. Senate in Louisiana, and in 1991 for governor. He lost both times, but both times he won the majority of the white vote, 60 and 55% respectively.
Okay.
If you look at the popular vote, since you don't do electoral college for state elections, that's Trump.
Yeah. Is it? Okay.
And, well, you know, he won the white vote and lost the election.
I see. Yes. 60. All right. Yeah.
I was one of the staffers of the main anti-Duke PAC at the time and ultimately became assistant director. In 90, even though our director, Lance Hill, myself, and a few of our founders wanted to focus on Duke's bigotry, ties to extremists, appeals to white racial resentment, after all, it was the issue. It was a moral struggle against racism, but we had mainstream Democratic consultants who warned us against focusing too much on it. That plays into Duke's hands and allows him to set the agenda. Does this sound familiar?
Nah, I never heard that one.
So sure, we could discuss his ties to the Nazis and such, but we shouldn't make a big deal out of his contemporary racist appeals per se, because, quote, lots of voters agree, end quote, with those appeals.
Oh.
He even encouraged us to talk about utterly superfluous crap like Duke paying his taxes late, or Duke avoiding service in Vietnam.
Why that little son of a... Yeah, all right.
Or Duke writing a sex manual under a female pseudonym. Yeah, he did that.
It's interesting to know that.
Although Lance held firm that we needed to talk mostly about racism, we did end up talking about some of the other stuff too, sadly. Right? As a matter of fact, Wilbur Ross is ruining the Commerce Department. That's not going to be a winning or losing argument with Trump in 2020. Okay? So back to Tim Wise. I say sadly because doing that normalized Duke as a regular candidate, attacking his generic character or bill-paying habits, or even discussing his inadequate plans for job creation, treated him like a normal candidate. But he wasn't as a Nazi.
Yes.
And none of his voters were voting for him because of jobs or tax policy or support for term limits, and none are going to turn on him over late tax payments or Vietnam.
No.
And throwing that stuff out there seemed desperate.
Yes.
Allowed people to say, well, if he's really this racist, why aren't they talking about all this other stuff? Or why are they talking about all this other stuff? It actually undermined our ability to paint him as the extremist he was. And as a result, the threat he posed wasn't clear enough to voters. And this didn't just allow him to get voters he might not have gotten otherwise. It also depressed turnout among people who almost certainly disliked him but didn't think they could win or would be all that big deal if he did. In fact, I recall conversations with, quote, liberals, end quote. I love it when liberals are in scare quotes.
Yeah.
Who said they weren't going to vote because, after all, Duke's Democratic opponent was just a shill for the oil and gas industry, and that was just as bad, blah, blah, frickin' blah.
Okay.
Some lefties can't tell the difference between corporatist assholes and actual literal Nazis. But we bore some responsibility for that because we got suckered into playing this conventional game and not playing into his narrative. Anyway, Duke gets 60% of the vote, black and white, liberal. Turnout is lower than it should have been. He gets 60% of the white vote. And then Duke gets 44% of the vote overall.
Okay.
Governor's race next year, we dispense with all that BS. We talked about Duke's ongoing Nazism and the moral practical evil of his racist appeals. We discussed how that moral evil would have had real-world consequences, driving tourists away, for example, hurting the economy. And because it was wrong, and it was not who we wanted to be, and it was not who we were better than that. Does flip any Duke's 1990 voters? No. He got 65,000 more votes in the governor's race than the Senate race, but it was never about flipping them. We knew that would be almost impossible. To flip Duke voters would require that they accept the fact that they had previously voted for a monster.
Yes.
Guess what? People are loath to do that. Our goal was not to flip them, but to drive up turnout among the good folks, many of whom stayed home in 1990. I don't know how many times you've heard me say this. The Trump base is not enough to win with. It's everybody else. Same concept here.
Right.
And that is what happened. The concerted effort of the anti-Duke forces, not just us, challenging Duke's politics of prejudice and making the election about what kind of state we want it to be, drove turnout through the roof, 28,000 plus registered one day alone, and tens of thousands more overall, most of them anti-Duke folks. When it was over, Duke had gotten 65,000 more votes than in 1990, but his white share went from 60 to 55, and overall to 39 from 44, because the anti-Duke turnout swamped him. So what does this have to do with 2020? Do I really need to explain it? Trying to flip Trump voters is a waste of time, except for that small sliver, 10%. But for the most part, that's true. It's certainly true with rally voters.
Yeah.
You never get them to flip it. Never. They're evangelicals. They want this to be what it is.
Yes.
Any of them who regret their vote don't need to be pandered to. They'll do the right thing and flip anyway. It's not he's saying they don't exist. It's just that you don't have to go after them.
All right.
If you're a Trump voter and you regret your vote, you're already a regretter. You don't have to go get them.
Yeah.
Okay. That said, he said very few will regret their vote. In Trump's case, about 8 to 10%. They cannot accept that they voted for a monster or got suckered. Duke retained 94% of the votes he got the first time out and got new people too. So that means 6% there. I think a little bit higher with Trump. As Trump likely will, I think not quite. So forget those people, or at least don't waste time tailoring messages to them. Those are two separate concepts. Don't forget them. Just don't make it all about them.
All right.
Okay? And what I know for a fact is this message that Trumpism is a threat. That's what.
Okay.
It's central to the election campaign we have to run.
Okay, and this is I kept reading this thing yesterday. I mean, there is more to it. We have to take our break, but we'll be right back with more of it and more discussion. Hang on. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And let's see, we were almost at the end of, I think all the major points had been made for the most part.
We're at the summary here, and the summary here is the more important part. But again, the whole point of the Tim Wise tweet thread is that he's a guy who ran against David Duke back in the 90s in Louisiana and beat him twice and has a better sense of how to do this. And what he says is, what I know for a fact is that this message that Trumpism is a threat to everything we care and love about this country is what will inspire the Democratic base to vote. That's what this election's about. I'm not saying the Democrats don't need policy ideas, but focusing on wonky, look how much I've thought about this stuff is not going to move the needle in 2020. And you know, that's true even in a positive sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, what's your favorite Elizabeth Warren policy off the top of you right now?
I don't know. Ice cream. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point.
Okay.
She's got a plan for that. You don't even have to know what it is or which one.
There's a plan somewhere.
Right? It's the concept. It's not the details.
Yes.
That's my point. Anyway.
Okay. All right.
Saying, focusing on wonky, look how much I've thought about this stuff's not going to move the needle. What the left never understands is we need to stop approaching elections like the goddamn debate team and start approaching it like the right does, like a cheerleading squad. Right? Whoever our nominee is, that's it.
Yes,
right.
Okay, sure.
Right? They're not corporate chills if it turns out they're not as left as you want, and they're not socialists if they're not as right as you want. They're our candidate, go for it. Team against their team. Get used to it. The right knows psychology, and we know public policy and sociology, and that doesn't win elections. People who say the Democrats should ignore Trump's race baiting because it's some genius political strategy calculated to distract us are idiots. He's no genius, and if you downplay it, you normalize him. If you make this about policy, you normalize him. He's a racist.
And
white nationalist. He's an authoritarian. He and his cult are a threat to the future of this nation. That's the message, not debates over marginal tax rates or how we're going to fund schools. Not to say the House shouldn't impeach over that stuff. They should. But the 2020 candidates must craft a message that's not about that. Trumpism is a threat to America more than Putin. And Putin didn't birth Trumpism. Conservative white America did. End of rant.
Okay.
Pretty good. Pretty good message. I think it's right. And that's why I think it's perfectly okay to say, the racist in the White House did this as a matter of fact, and don't get into a debate about whether it's racist or not. That's not the point. It is. If you don't understand that, you got it wrong. Let's move on.
Okay. Yeah, my big question is whether candidates can be convinced of that in say, a debate context.
Tweets like Nancy Pelosi did. That's not hard. But get the racism in there.
Yeah, all right. It'll be...
I object to his racist tweets. They're bad for America. I object to his racist actions. I object to him hiring white supremacists. You don't have to make it about him personally if you don't want to, if you're uncomfortable with that. I'm comfortable with that because it's true.
Yeah,
well... Kamala Harris might be in a better position to make that argument than anybody else. But, it doesn't matter. You can make that argument. Biden has made that argument.
All right.
They all can make that argument.
Yes. Right. Well, I guess I'm curious. I don't know. I mean, we're going to see. I guess it's just a matter of time. I will wait to see how that happens in the debate.
Commercial was all about that. I mean, he made that the centerpiece.
Yeah. I need to see it face to face on the debate stage sometime.
Do you mean between the Democratic candidates, or do you mean between whoever it is and Trump?
Between whoever it is and Trump.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll have to wait for that because you can't hurry it.
Right. It happens at a certain time, and that's the problem with this stuff. Right. I think that what the left doesn't understand is I'm very impatient, and I don't know. I thought that would be a more serious point if I prefaced it by saying what the left doesn't understand.
Right.
That was a little odd, but okay.
So let's be more specific. How does this play with America? CBS, of course, had a poll yesterday out. Most Americans, 59%, disagree with President Trump's tweets about 4 Democratic congresswomen of color. Of course, there were sharp partisan and racial differences, but 59% disagree with Trump's tweets.
Well, good.
Right? Republicans, 82% agree, 18% don't. So 18% are gettable. Democrats, 12% agree, 88% don't.
What do we do with our
probably 12? More importantly, of the independents, 42% agree and 58% don't.
Okay.
You win 58-42, that's what we in politics call a landslide. No, it's not unanimous.
Narrow victory.
But that's not the point. It's never going to be.
Right. We got through by the skin of our teeth, and we need to come to the center.
You're looking at a 60-40 election here if that were the only thing that people are voting on. So there's nothing wrong with what Tim Weiss has suggested.
No, I have not said so. But yeah, we have to do it.
It's just good politics. He's right.
Yeah. Oh no, it certainly worked on David Duke, even to the extent that
in Louisiana, which is a lot more conservative than the country as a whole.
And I mean, we know it worked. Even Donald Trump knew that he needed to disavow David Duke. These many years later, and then of course somebody slipped him a note and said, "No, you're supposed to say you never heard of him before." Oh right. Yeah, right, yeah, that.
So don't forget the minority whip is David Duke without the baggage.
Yes, there's no such thing, of course, but yeah, he is, and
that would be Steve Scalise, self-described.
Right. Yeah, and he's doing everything he can to whip up the same fervor to get the baggage, I guess.
Right. Looking at Republicans alone.
The bags. Yeah.
In the CBS News poll, looking at Republicans alone in these battleground states, ideas expressed in Trump's tweets were, among Republicans, pro-American, 64%. Okay, I would point out that's a remarkably low number.
Yeah, so... Right.
Among Republicans, un-American, 13%. If you think 18% aren't gettable, 13% are. And neither 23%. That's the softer group. But there are Republicans who don't like what Trump is doing, and you can communicate with them.
All right.
Okay. And by the way, the people he's attacking: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley.
Yes. Everybody
People don't know who they are. They're actually better known to Republicans than they are to members of their own party.
Right. Like Saul Alinsky.
Right. All have net favorable ratings among Democrats who do know him. Or what his name? Reverend. Who was it with Obama?
Reverend? With
Reverend Wright.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Oh right. Correct. That is to say.
Reverend Wright. WRIGHT. Because that's going to doom him.
Yeah. Oh, everybody knows that's going to do it.
Between Saul Alinsky
Republicans,
and Reverend Wright, he's doomed. Just ask, any political commentator on television at the time.
Sure. That's the end of it.
Right. So, all of that, I think, plays to the fact that it's very good strategy. Now, it's not automatic. The fact of the matter is that racism is wrong, but running a political campaign on racism isn't an automatic loser just because it's wrong. You have to make it so. That's why with the commentary we were going over in terms of why it's important to make it the central part of it is so important.
Yes.
Okay, and that was Tim Wise. Now, Tim Alberta, who just is out with the book American Carnage about the Trump campaign in 2016, says, I've been shouting this in the rooftops. Trump's challenge won't be turning out blue-collar workers in Green Bay and Lancaster and Midland. It'll be hanging on to suburbanites in Waukesha and Bucks and Livingston. The WOW counties? Is that what that is?
The what?
The WOW counties?
The WOW
W-O-W.
counties. What is that?
Those are the counties in Wisconsin that count.
Oh, okay. But why WOW?
Waukesha, I guess. I have to go look them up.
Okay. I'll believe it. But yeah, that's the what? Crucial. The
crucial part.
Crucial Waukesha County.
Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington.
Ah, wow. All right. I see.
Those counties, W-O-W, all capitalized.
Yes.
Right? Win those, you win Wisconsin.
Right. Turn them over and make them mom counties.
Right. So Nate Cohen, not Nate Silver, but Nate Cohen, who was arguing with Nate Silver about this, and as people noted, we hate when our Nates fight with each other.
Huh.
But Nate Cohen had a whole article about how Trump's electoral college advantage persists if 2020 plays out like 2016. That is to say, California and even Texas can run up the Democratic votes, still lose the electoral college if you can't take places like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. But Trump's ratings are not particularly good in those three places, especially in Pennsylvania and Michigan. Wisconsin probably will be the tipping point. But again, the point of all of that is that Wisconsin has suburbs. That's where Trump is weak. And so it's important to play up the racism part because the suburban Republican voters are extremely uncomfortable with that. And it may or may not make any difference in the rural areas. In Steve King's district in Iowa, it may or may not make any difference. But that's not the point. You're not trying to convert Trump voters. You're trying to get the reluctant, perhaps voters or those who stayed home and didn't vote at all, but normally would vote. And that's where the suburbs come in. It isn't a play for the people who never vote. Because you know what? People who never vote tend not to vote.
Well, I guess yes. If you're still never voting, I don't know if anything will convince you.
Exactly right. Trump alone will do that. But the way Trump alone will do that is that you highlight who he is. So it all gets back to Tim Wise's strategy and why that's important.
Okay.
So that's a lot of the news that came out over the week. And the other news that came out is that in general, Bernie's not doing particularly well in polls, and especially New Hampshire polls.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, this is a different poll altogether. This is a straw poll from DFA.
Should get rid of straws. They should change the name, by the way, now that they're getting rid of straws.
Really? So Elizabeth Warren's cut sharply into Bernie Sanders' front-runner standing among members of the Progressive Political Action Committee Democracy for America, according to the group's latest straw poll. And Kamala Harris vaulted ahead of Joe Biden into third place. So Warren, Sanders, Harris.
DFA, okay.
Pete Buttigieg has dropped, and no other candidate besides Sanders, Warren, and Harris broke single digits in the survey. As Politico points out, the survey is less consequential as a measure of public opinion than as an indicator of activist support and of shifting alliances on the Democratic Party's left flank.
All right. I can believe that.
So I made the argument over the weekend that it isn't just a question of Warren and Sanders fighting for the same voters, because Warren voters and Sanders voters are actually quite different. Warren voters tend to be white college, and Sanders voters tend to be younger, regardless, white, non-white. And they're just different groups,
Yes.
and they don't automatically fall in place with each other. We talked about this last week. Morning Consult said that
Right.
Sanders' second choice voters, if voters didn't get Sanders, according to the Morning Consult poll, Sanders voters' second choice was Joe Biden.
Yeah, right. And you surprised me with that one. And
Right? And Warren's was Harris.
yes, that made more sense. I think.
Now, with all of them, it's
Maybe
a
not.
range, but you can't automatically assume how people are going to vote. Oh, I was a Sanders voter, but now that he's losing altitude, I'll just vote for Warren. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe Sanders' vote will be split into three other people.
Yeah.
You know, you just can't
Right.
tell in advance, and that's the whole fun thing about caucuses, right? That's the way Iowa caucus works.
Yeah, I mean it's a fun
why it's so hard to
sociology
predict.
experiment. It's just not a great way to vote, but okay.
Right. So the rest of the field remained far behind Sanders at 32, Warren at 26, Harris was running at 12, Biden at 10, Andrew Yang at 7.
Wow.
Right? Gives you an idea of how useful the poll is overall if you're looking at general public stuff. If Yang is at 7,
Okay.
nonetheless, there it is.
All right.
Big article in Boston Globe. Bernie Sanders might be losing his New Hampshire firewall. James Spindell, reporter I like to follow. In 2016, no state was better for Sanders than New Hampshire. The independent senator won the first in the nation primary with 60% of the vote, 22-point win over Clinton, who had a decades-long relationship with New Hampshire, was the biggest victory margin in that state for a competitive Democratic primary in over half a century. So Sanders has returned to the state often. His son ran for Congress in the state last year, and he's gone from being the unquestioned frontrunner to second place and sliding.
Well, all right. That's not the way you want to go in.
His campaign supporters felt they had New Hampshire in the bag and they could run this national campaign and dare others to catch up. But here they are in the summer. They're suddenly tumbling in what should be their best early state, said Wayne Lesbrance, a political science professor at New England College in Henniker, New Hampshire. And if he doesn't win here, where can he actually go? Or actually, as everybody points out, everybody has to win New Hampshire.
Yeah, I mean,
not
it
just
wasn't
Bernie,
a bad
but Bernie
strategy.
especially.
It made sense at the time, I think. Neighboring state, won it overwhelmingly last time. Yes, totally different situation, but if you were doing well and the polls said still going strong, I would say, yeah, there's a whole other country out there. We should be campaigning there.
The UNH poll suggests that in the past few months, Warren has become more interesting to New Hampshire Democrats, particularly women in the southern part of the state. Sanders is better positioned with men in the north. If you look at that men-woman divide, it explains how come Warren supporters go to Harris and Sanders supporters go to Biden.
Yeah. Right.
Right? That is a not
Unless
very
it's the
talked about
age
part of
thing.
this.
Yeah.
In the poll, Sanders and Warren were tied at the most popular candidate in the field with 67 favorability for each. Biden was 57. And with 25 candidates in the field, it'll probably be impossible for anybody to blow out New Hampshire or the first caucus in Iowa. But,
Yeah.
there still must win for a lot of these folks.
Yes, that's what they'll want out of it. Yeah. Well, that's supposed to be the role. I mean, I guess I don't know why we think that they're uniquely qualified to do it, but culling the herd is what the early contests are supposed to be about.
Now, that CBS poll that I mentioned, Wyeth Ruthven finds a very interesting nugget in there.
Oh, where is this?
Where do you get your campaign information?
Where do? Oh, okay. Yes.
All right. And it gives you an idea that Iowa is a little bit more tuned into what's going on right now than New Hampshire or South Carolina. The reason I say that, those are the three states they looked at. Remember, it's a battleground poll. In Iowa, where do you get your campaign information? Social media, 22%. Friends and Family 23.
Mm-hmm.
In New Hampshire, Social Media 21, Friends and Family 28.
Yes. Okay.
South Carolina is the family-friendly state. Social Media 23, Friends and Family 33.
Okay.
So if you're getting your information from friends and family rather than media, including social media, I'm just saying.
Yes.
My guess is you probably have a harder time changing your mind.
Yeah, I guess so, right? I mean, assuming you trust them, I mean, it may just be that, the more...
Unless your family radically changes, and that tends not to happen.
Well, no, that's true. Or if you come to the conclusion, like, I get my news there, but my family's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's going to change anything radically. It's just kind of interesting.
Yes.
In Iowa, it looks like they're really paying attention, and they're looking at media to get information.
That's
more so than just talking to their friends and family.
Ah. Well, that's what I would say if somebody asked me. Where do you get your news? From the trusted sources, of course. Yeah. Oh, right. Well, that's true.
That counts as social media.
Yeah, right. That's
a podcast.
Think of us as family.
Yeah.
I think just as confused. It's not because I want
I
to
think
have
of
a
our
relationship.
Family. My brother's always wrong, but I always defend him. Yeah. Don't you go picking on him.
Right.
We are family.
Yes. So I think everybody in those states, please answer the question differently.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. I don't. Is this one in our list yet, or
no? It's in the Pundit Roundup.
Okay. I can identify that. Okay. Yeah. Very easy. Okay. Well, it's crazy out there, folks. All right. Well, that's an interesting thing. It would never occur to me to say about where do you get your news? My family. I don't know. I mean, I suppose that's actually truer than I would acknowledge ordinarily. Although, well, I have a unique problem in that my family gets it from me, and then I want to listen to your podcast.
The question is whether it comes back to you to say, well, you gave it to them. That's always fun.
That's true, and also, so if they tell me that, I guess they could say that.
It's an important concept, and we in the medical field, for example, look to give vaccine information from trusted advisors.
Yes.
That's the best way to influence people. And the same is true for family, and that's why that's so important.
All right.
Because you don't just get your news from family, you might be persuaded by the news you get from family.
Yeah.
Social media, I don't know, it depends.
We need to hire more families.
Yeah, I suppose.
I think is what
okay. Now, this is a piece from Brookings. Right.
An institution.
Stade Brookings, an institution in and of itself.
Yeah.
But goes back to the theme that we started with. Racism is not a distraction, it's policy.
Okay.
Right? Policy encompasses written legislation, mandates, acts, and regulations in governments, institutions, and businesses to influence behaviors. Those who charge that Trump's bigoted vitriol is a distraction wrongly limit policy to those written concrete forms. Policy also comes in the form of practice, exercise procedures that are used to influence behaviors. That is to say, for example, appointing Stephen Miller to White House advisor on domestic problems.
Yes.
Many policies are unwritten or are implied through communicated rhetoric. Again, Stephen Miller's still in the White House, so Trump therefore has no problem with white nationalism.
Yes, and he was big on the weekend shows.
Because if you're going to prove to people that you're not a white nationalist, who better to send out there than Stephen Miller?
There's rarely a good reason to send him for anything, unless that's the message.
Right. Many voters make decisions and vote on racist rhetoric just as they would act on issues of foreign policy or Social Security. Racism should never be diminished as a distraction. This isn't just a campaign veteran telling you this. This is the Brookings Institute. Racism should never be diminished as a distraction. History shows well that the strategic deployment of bigotry is a default practice used to undercut democracy. Inserting nativist xenophobic language has been the reliable prelude to codifying bigotry into law. And then it goes back to the Know Nothing Party and how they tried to kick out Catholics. We talked about this the other day. Or the Japanese in World War II. More recently, before the Trump administration instituted the policy of separating families at the Mexico border, he laid the groundwork on the campaign trail. With Mexico sends its people, and they're not sending the best. So policy is more than just, okay, I have this particular procedure that's written in the congressional record on such and such a date.
Not just plan.
It's what you say and how you act. Okay. And that's why you have to call it out and identify it as what it is. Racism it finishes, racism is never a distraction. It's the policy of the privileged and the enemy of the just. But again, that alone won't win elections. You got to go out and win elections and play smart. I would argue that whereas the racism is central, policy can be key, not because people will vote for a policy of yours that they like, but people may well vote against a policy they don't like. That's why the Democrats have to be careful with their health care issues. We talked the other day about this.
Yeah.
Back in 2018, they were running against what the GOP wants to do. All right? And the Medicare for all, Medicare for America, public option, do nothing, support Affordable Care Act argument that the Democrats are going to have is actually good policy and awful politics, because it makes it look like a bunch of people raise their hands about getting rid of your health plan that you just worked so hard to get. Even though you're not happy with it, you don't want it to go away and change. That makes you nervous. Bad politics. That's just something we'll have to keep an eye on.
Yes, I guess so.
It's got nothing to do with what the better policy is. But what you have to communicate is that you are positively for making healthcare better for people, and the Republicans are positively and clearly demonstrably against it. And that's what has to come out of the healthcare discussion. If it doesn't, then we did it wrong.
We do that. If now Donald Trump, of course, tells everybody that we're going to have beautiful healthcare. So I guess you just have to say, no, we're not, if he does it. But I mean, I'll say this: if you're looking for a way to turn him into a political genius, you could do it right there. You see, he knew very well not to address policy specifics, but to simply say, "You'll have beautiful health care that everybody's going to love, and it'll cost less."
That's actually correct.
He did a great job with that one. So this is running for president's a lot simpler than I thought. I may have to do it, although I don't want it. I don't want to win accidentally like he did.
Right.
Think I can get the FBI director to issue a letter somehow that just throws it to me at the end?
Well, my advice for the Democratic candidates is, however you feel about your health care proposals, don't be so stupid as to raise your hand on yes and no questions. You have to say, I'm sorry, I can't. That's a terrible question. It's too complicated. Or
that
something.
Seems like a good answer.
Yeah. That's not a good way to address this. It's too important.
It's something
that lets you get more than like 30 seconds to talk about it.
That should make sense to people. I mean, they put so much effort into organizing these debates and have arcane practices for who's going to be on the stage and how tall are the podiums going to be, and do you get to have water, and then to have the journalists moderating it, saying I can still reduce this to yes,
What do you remember about it? Nothing. Harris took after Biden. Biden didn't do that well, and everybody raised their hand about getting rid of insurance companies. And that was 4 hours worth of debate, and that's the only thing you remember.
Pretty amazing. All right.
Right? Don't do that. That's stupid. That's a self-inflicted wound.
Okay. Well, we can treat those wounds, and we can do it for less. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Well, all of that will take you to the end of the hour, so now we only have an hour left.
Right. And
what are you going to talk about?
Well, first I'm going to tell everybody that at the break I'm going to go see what the doorbell ringing was about.
Okay.
That'll be very exciting, and I'll find out what that is.
I can send Abby. She's very good.
Okay. Yeah, see.
I do have something else to tell you, though, in the few minutes I have.
Sure.
So I'm on the show with you Wednesday.
That is true.
And then Thursday.
Yes. Allegedly.
Next week, and the week after that, I'm on vacation.
Oh, well, can we go?
2 weeks without me, so you'll just have to do it.
No, I guess not. Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to deal, and I think we can probably manage. It would be a good idea. I should take one of these vacations.
Yeah. I've been to Iceland. This time I'm going to Alaska.
Okay, that's similar. It's cold.
I just want to see whether or not
actually it's not. It's hot there now.
That's the thing.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting. I think, good destination. I'd like to go there. Just tell me what happens. And then
when I get back.
Yeah. You can call from there. They have Skype.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, the main thing, though, is...
And it's still night, I think. So
I think the main thing is, besides seeing the mountain, besides seeing Denali, is I get to see sled dog puppies.
Oh, well, yeah. Oh, you'll probably take one of those home. Look out.
I don't know about that, but, if I'm going to spend the day with sled dog puppies, it's going to be a great trip.
Yeah, that's a pretty good idea. All right. Well, when does that happens next week?
Next week.
And the week after that as well, because Alaska, far away.
Yeah, I leave the 27th, and I'm back on the 8th. So
okay, I will
like
probably.
So you're on your own.
Okay, very good. We'll do that.
As they said in Blazing Saddles.
Okay, I can appreciate that. I hear banging around outside now. I think somebody rang my doorbell to say that they were going to do some unauthorized work on my house. I better go figure out what that is.
Well, maybe they're working on the doorbell.
Yeah, could be. Make it louder, please.
Right. All righty. Take care,
Thanks,
and
Greg.
I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Yes. All right.
That'll be Mueller Day, so we'll have a lot to say.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll preview it, and then it'll all go to hell, and we'll see how. And so Thursday we can talk about how Jim Jordan embarrassed himself.
Exactly right. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you. You do the same. We'll be back in. Our break hasn't come up just yet. But pretty soon. Let's see. We can try and peek through Pocket and see what's up. Here's one that probably could wreck your plans for the rest of the week if we dove into it. It's very long, for one thing. But everybody is now tweeting around, and I don't know what to make of it. I haven't read it yet. It's very long, and I'm a little worried about it. But the New Yorker, Jane May, does she say Mayer? Or Meyer. I'll have to, again, and there's another one of those names I got to check on. The case of Al Franken is the case of the thing that everybody is tweeting around and that I don't know what to do with yet. And it's a disturbing prospect. I mean, look, if the premise of the article is correct, and we're a little bit behind on our music here, so we'll cut out a little earlier than usual. But if the premise of the article is correct, then it's something we absolutely have to take note of because fact and reality. And but it's such a touchy subject that it's a very difficult one to be willing to take up unarmed. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We just had that 1 minute break, and it gave me a chance to dash out and peek outside the window and see what was going on. And don't worry, everybody, it's just the exterminator. It's not coming for me. It's coming for our quarterly treatment outside. They just knock on the door, ring the bell to let you know I'm spraying poison around your house, and it's all you can do to allow them to go ahead. All right. Well, let's see. Armando begs me not to go down the Franken Road. Don't worry about that. That can't happen yet today. That's going to take a lot of preparation, and I'm not sure we're ever going to get there. But this one, first of all, the article is long enough that it would eat up the rest of the day. And not that has ever stopped me before, but I just don't. I don't know what to make of it, and it's hard to dismiss when Jane Meyer, however she pronounces it, comes up with anything. It's always a must read. But yeah, right off the bat, I mean, I'll just note that it's out there, and right off the bat, I'll note that the reactions to it, I don't know whether people have read it themselves or not. It's one of those things. On the one hand, again, it appears the premise of the article appears to be that it was that Franken's main accuser appears not to have had the main points of her story hold up. But of course there were several, and that's one of the other issues. And also I guess another of the main points of the article, from what I can gather, is that it appears to have been coordinated and set up essentially by Republicans as a method of getting rid of him, and that also could be true. So, like I said, there could be a lot of truth going on all sides of the story. Some of these pictures obviously exist. It's extraordinarily complex and engenders a lot of a lot of anxiety, certainly for me. How about that? I can just talk about it from my own perspective. And a lot of worries that it is just so much Gillibrand bashing, which seems like a waste of time at this point in the game. I think if she had been doing better, She would have, I suppose she would have been doing better had this episode not happened, because it's cost her a lot of support from people who say this should never have happened to Al Franken, and that costs other people a lot of support when people say, how can you say that that shouldn't have happened when so many people have made these accusations? It's not a winning situation, certainly not for me, and I'm going to have to, definitely going to have to do the reading before I dive into it. But I was going to say, I guess it's the sort of thing that I would have a lot easier time believing was Gillibrand bashing primarily, with that primarily in mind. If she were doing better, if she were the front runner or at the top of the heap, among the top tier of candidates, I would understand the attack, that it was a veiled attack on Gillibrand, better. But it may still be one, so I don't know. Anyway, I think I will shy away from that one for the time being, before I can, at least before I get to digest, one, what's in the article, and two, I'm going to need to see some response to that article before any of the rest of it. I can't, I can't give the show over to something that one-sided without absorbing the impact of it, especially when it's happening inside the Democratic Party. All right, there's plenty of other things, of course, but I did want to note, I see that it's there, and I am actively running away from it. Call me a coward, I suppose. But, yeah, there's a lot of other things that we probably ought to be spending some time on, and could. Let's see. Here's one of the more interesting things, I think, and it's a little bit of a departure from the normal politics, but then the story itself is about departure from normal politics. This struck me over the weekend. Did we note this? I feel like we may have read about this just in passing when it happened and said, oh my God, what the hell's that about? And we have some more answers about what the hell it was about, but it still leaves us baffled. This and Ali Watkins piece in the New York Times. Do you remember this story? Here's the headline. He wasn't seeking to kill a mob boss, and so few of us are these days, really. It's a thing among most of us. He wasn't seeking to kill a mob boss. He was trying to help Trump, his lawyer says. What? In new court documents, the lawyer for Anthony Comello, does the name ring a bell? Probably not. It says he became obsessed by far-right QAnon conspiracy theories. Well, that, of course, sounds a lot more familiar. Do you remember this story? It's the murder. It's not surprising in the grand scheme of things. Mob bosses get murdered. It's what they do. And that this one got murdered, I guess, was no particular surprise, although no one, the people who normally cover the mob boss murder beat were saying, this is unusual. I didn't anticipate a gang war breaking out anytime. And really, who does? But sometimes it's more obvious than others to people on the beat, and this one was not. And it did make news, because even though it is what happens to mob bosses, it's still, the newspapers, they like it. It's a good story. It's dramatic. But I do remember seeing that he had been killed, and then the next couple of days, a little bit of mystery about it, who did it or whatever. And then it came out that it was just this nobody guy who just had it in his head that guy not needed to be killed, or maybe that it was just a normal thing to do to kill a mob boss. And now there's more information on it, and guess what? QAnon people are crazy and dangerous. And I think this is the third one that I can think of offhand where QAnon has driven adherents to show up somewhere heavily armed. Not always do they shoot people, but they create a tremendous disturbance and a very dangerous situation. I know, of course, I'm thinking of the guy who showed up at Comet Pizza with an assault rifle, and I think he actually fired it, but he didn't shoot any people. But again, tremendously volatile situation. Who knows where that could have gone? Glad that didn't escalate to something really super dangerous. Then there was lesser known, but still just as dangerous. There was a guy who a couple of months ago, maybe, didn't he show up at the Hoover Dam and make some crazy demands? Your typical conspiracy theory kind of crazy. He was demanding that the government should release a secret report that they were trying to hide from the American people, according to QAnon. And of course, nobody knew what the hell he was talking about. But I think he was threatening, government employees, and nothing came of it, thankfully. But it made a little blip in the news and went away. And now this guy. Now, admittedly, as the choices of people to kill go, you're doing relatively well versus your average person who is just trying to make it through their day at work or day at school to kill a mob boss. I think they build that into the lifestyle, and they don't want to die either, but I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say anything good about killing other people extrajudicially, but or really, frankly, judicially is not that great either, as I'm sure a lot of you know. So here's the story. This is from yesterday's paper. As his pickup truck roared toward the Todt Hill section, I'm guessing T-O-D-T, Toad Hill, not Toad, but Toad Hill section of Staten Island. Yeah, I don't know how they say that. I think they say Toad Hill in Staten Island. I think that's the way it's pronounced. Anthony Comello had no intention of killing a mob boss, which really, I think a lot of Anthony Comellos of Staten Island probably, it's 50-50 whenever they set out on a trip, whether they have an intent to kill a mob boss sometimes. But this time, Anthony Comello didn't. And this is the interesting part, he only wanted to arrest him. Well, okay, that's totally reasonable, right? He's not out of his mind. He just wanted to arrest the mob boss. Don't we all? Well, not this way. He wanted to arrest him, his lawyer said, in new court documents. And it's not the fact that it was mentioned in court documents that makes it weird. It's this. The details of what happened next are well known. Mr. Comello, even crazy QAnon conspiracy theorists who murder people, even if the people they murder are mob bosses, get referred to in the New York Times as Mr. Comello, unless they're women, and then it doesn't happen. But okay. Anyway, he's 24 years old, all of 24 years old, arrived at the home of Francesco Frankie Boy Cali, C-A-L-I, a leader, really, if you think about it and read correctly, a leader in the Gambino crime family, and lured him outside. How do you do that? How do you get that done? He managed. So the men spoke briefly. The prosecutors say that Mr. Comello pulled a gun from his car and shot Mr. Cali, leaving him to die in the street. I minus the details, I could have figured that out myself, but okay. By the way, yes, Armando signaling me that he would like to speak at some point about impeaching the president. I think that's an important topic, and we will absolutely get to that one. And maybe that'll just be the next topic, if I can make it through this article. This was just astounding to me. Anyway, Comello, an aimless young man, who could in fact aim, it turns out, because he killed Frankie Boy Cali, an aimless young man who lived with his parents on Staten Island, was arrested 3 days later and charged with murder. That's what happens. But court documents filed on Friday offered a glimpse into the deeply troubled mind of Mr. Comello, who his defense lawyer says was so deluded by internet conspiracy theories that he was determined to conduct a citizen's arrest of Mr. Cali and turn the mafia leader over to the military. That is a confused individual. Good idea to arrest the mob boss. Can't argue with that, but as a citizen's arrest, I've never seen that done. And of course, turning him over to the military, I mean, where did he get the idea that that could even be a thing that would happen? And the answer is online conspiracy theory with crazy people. He ardently believed that Francesco Cali, a boss in the Gambino crime family, was a prominent member of the deep state, and accordingly an appropriate target for a citizen's arrest, wrote Mr. Comello's lawyer, Robert C. Gottlieb. That is pretty amazing. And I've never heard, I'm not a student of QAnon, but I've never heard anybody say that mob bosses were in fact part of the deep state. I thought this is really interesting, and there may be a split among the deep state believer community on this, but clearly the QAnon side of the deep state conspiracy theory believers divide is that much or some significant portion of the deep state exists outside of the state, I guess, and that we've turned over control of actual government functioning to actual criminals as opposed to just people who behave criminally when they're in public office. It's an interesting theory, and I don't know where it comes from. It's always interesting when it turns out that there's some part of a conspiracy theory that you can say, well, that might not necessarily be totally crazy, but it's way off the mark, or they misunderstand this, portion of what we are doing here. But this one is like maybe unconnected to anything. At times, the circumstances of Mr. Calley's demise have seemed so outlandish that they appeared specially designed for these viral times. A glitch in the Matrix, as Oliver Willis would put it. But a clearer picture is emerging of how the tale's incongruous pieces, a mob boss, a drifter from Staten Island, and a far-right conspiracy theory may fit together. Mr. Calley's murder was the highest-profile mob killing in decades, an event so significant that in the days between Mr. Calley's death and Mr. Comello's arrest, speculation surged that a new war was brewing among New York's 5 mafia families. The reality, according to his lawyer, appears to have been even more bizarre. Mr. Comello had become convinced that Mr. Calley was part of the so-called deep state, a cabal of criminals that conspiracy theorists claim controls the United States government. Mr. Comello also believed he was a chosen vigilante of President Trump. It's good news then when people show up at his rallies and hold those Q signs and the television shows that and nobody says, get the hell out of here. You people are too crazy even for us. What are we supposed to take away from this? Mr. Comello became certain that he was enjoying the protection of President Trump himself and that he had the president's full support, Mr. Gottlieb wrote, and I gotta be honest with you, I'd say it's a coin toss about whether or not the guy gets pardoned. I don't know whether there's some chance that the president is so demented that he's into this. I don't know. We'll find out. I think they can tackle him and prevent him from doing it inside the White House. That delusion will be part of a package of evidence that Mr. Gottlieb says he plans to submit to the court that prove Mr. Comello is not guilty by reason of mental defect. That sounds like it's likely to work. Mr. Gottlieb is seeking to have the court place Mr. Comello in psychiatric treatment rather than prosecute him on murder charges. He might not have to be pardoned. Mr. Comello is being held in protective custody as he awaits trial. Just because he was a crazy loon doesn't mean the mob won't be interested in, punishing him for killing one of its leaders. But I don't know. How much effort do they put into this? Prosecutors in the Staten Island District Attorney's Office declined to comment. Mr. Comello took handcuffs with him to Todt Hill on March 13th, Mr. Gottlieb said, but his plan was foiled when Mr. Calley refused to submit to a citizen's arrest. That part is probably not that surprising, right? He would probably refuse to submit to a regular arrest. Instead, Mr. Gottlieb said the Gambino leader reached toward his waistband. Fearing for his life, can you imagine if you were going to get away with it? I was fearing for my life, standing my ground, but you weren't supposed to be there. You're crazy. Fearing for his life, Mr. Comello shot Mr. Calley 10 times and fled, Mr. Gottlieb said. That's a serious shattering of the mob boss mythos there, I think. Especially since he was probably reaching toward his waistband to give himself a wedgie. QAnon, a baseless conspiracy theory that originated on internet message boards, glad they finally said that, played a key role in Mr. Comello's descent into mental instability, his lawyer said. It claims, among other things, that America is controlled by a deep state, that prominent Democratic politicians are pedophiles, that's the projection part, and that John F. Kennedy Jr., who died in a 1999 plane crash, is secretly alive and will run for president in 2020. And boy, will he be surprised that he's one of a field of 26. At Mr. Comello's first court appearance in March, he displayed symbols and phrases associated with QAnon scrawled on his hand in pen. It's good for his case, I think. He first began to take an interest in political conspiracy theories, Mr. Gottlieb said, in the weeks after Mr. Trump's 2016 election. Interesting. Mr. Comello's support for QAnon went beyond mere participation in a radical political organization, Mr. Gottlieb wrote. And hold on for just a minute here. It's not a political organization, please. I don't think you can lay that on our feet, right? I mean, it's just a bunch of weirdos, isn't it? Isn't it? But then again, they attend rallies, and that's a whole other inquiry. So he goes on to say it evolved into a delusional obsession. Driven by that obsession, Mr. Gottlieb said, Mr. Comello began early this year to attempt citizens' arrests of people he believed to be associated with the deep state. He didn't start with the mob boss. He just didn't, I guess he didn't think that they were likely to shoot him. So thankfully, he, I don't know, did he go armed with these things? In February, Mr. Comello twice tried to conduct his own arrest of Mayor Bill de Blasio, including one instance in which he showed up at Gracie Mansion, the mayoral home in Manhattan. And that's troubling, and he's a presidential candidate now. So, I guess if you really wanted to whip this up into something, you could say, yeah, QAnon conspiracy theorists are targeting Democratic presidential candidates now. You'd have to remind people that Bill de Blasio is one, though. So I'm not sure how well that would catch on. Not long after that incident, Mr. Comello sought the help of United States Marshals at Federal District Court in Manhattan and asked that they help him arrest two California Democrats, Representatives Maxine Waters and Adam Schiff. Can you imagine this? So both of whom he believed were in the vicinity. He was rebuffed. Well, at least so far, the United States Marshals aren't going along with this. But, well, I don't know. I mean, if you really want to tie that to Trump, again, we keep worrying that the day is going to come that he simply orders the arrest of prominent Democrats and other political opponents. And there's some number of people out there who believe they've been personally deputized to do these things, and they show up at his rallies, and it's all there for us to see on television. Both incidents were confirmed by law enforcement officials. Comello here was also posting and sharing conspiracy theories online that are associated with the far right, gee whiz, and was engaging with other QAnon believers on the internet, according to social media accounts linked to Mr. Comello from around the same time. Mr. Gottlieb identified one of Mr. Comello's accounts, Real America's Voice, and then underscore after that. Real America's Voice underscore on Instagram in his filing. The page has dozens of memes and written screeds, some that are difficult to decipher, including several posted days before Mr. Calley's death. One post accuses Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California, of being a fascist. Patriot sleeper cells are awake, he wrote in another. Yet another refers to Bill and Hillary Clinton as the Clinton crime family, and it's interesting that he knows about crime families. And, well, thankfully, I guess when he finally fell victim to his delusions and became violent, he was dealing with an actual crime family. But I don't even know what to make of this. How Mr. Comello came to associate Mr. Calley or the Gambino crime family with such theories remains unclear. Unfortunately, we haven't cleared that one up, yeah? Typically, the conspiracy group targets Democratic political figures, not the mafia. But Mr. Gottlieb said he believed Mr. Comello had encountered posts online that suggested mafia figures like Mr. Calley were also connected to the deep state. Mr. Gottlieb said on Saturday that he was sifting through thousands and thousands of messages, posts, and forums that he said Mr. Comello might have engaged with. This doesn't sound very fruitful, but he's not going to have a problem with the crazy defense, I guess. The defense lawyer is also asking a judge to order prosecutors to provide details about anything found in Mr. Calley's home or car when they were searched after the shooting, including whether any weapons were found on or near Mr. Calley's body. Well, they're going to have to pursue that, I guess, for thoroughness, but I don't know how much that's going to help them. It's very weird. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change what Democratic candidates have to do in terms of dealing with Trump. It doesn't change the fact that we ought to be impeaching him and we're not, and we can move on to that subject finally at last. I thought I would note for the record because I bet we're going to see more like this. And I assume that under the radar there are QAnon conspiracy theorist weirdos trying to effect citizens' arrests all the time, all over the place. We know that the sovereign citizen types have been trying to do this. I think not a few weeks ago, I think we saw some, militia types showing up somewhere and again trying to enlist the help of actual police or courtroom marshals to effect their arrests, and they were, being rebuffed, of course. But I guess this is just another danger area to watch, along with the rest of the alt-right weirdos and Proud Boys who, to this point, seem mostly interested just in beating people up, not in assassinating mob leaders. But it's a danger, and another of the right-wing violence point sources that are mostly being ignored by law enforcement, and who can really even tell what the reasoning is behind it. Okay, there's lots more that we ought to catch up on. Armando, if you want to join in at any point, maybe you want to wait until the break and then call in, and we can switch over to impeachment at that point. It's going to be an important topic, certainly because, it always is, and it shouldn't go away at any point. Mueller will be testifying. I don't know what the impact of that is going to be and whether it's going to convince any more people, but, we could still use more discussion about it. Certainly it's going to fan the flames, so we'll go back in that direction after the break. Brief note here from the Hill, just so we're all up to speed on it. An appeals court has rejected a Trump administration request to dismiss another of the emoluments lawsuits. They did, I think, succeed in getting an emolument case shut down in the appeals courts that was coming from the attorneys general of D.C. and Maryland, as I recall. That and it was dismissed on another of the fun and interesting theories of standing, that the state attorneys general didn't have standing to press these claims on behalf, I think they said, of other competing hotels that thought business was being diverted away from them. Probably true. But though I had a feeling, given the way that those judges approached this one, Armando says they haven't done that yet. I'll have to go back and dig up during the break what it was that I was looking at. But they appeared to be leaning toward the idea that you think it was just a district court Trump judge? Possibly true. Now he thinks I'm right. See? Damn it. I should never. Why am I listening to you? Shut up. Wait until after the break if you're going to make these mistakes, please. Anyway, yeah, I think I was right about that, and that they were saying that this was not something that I don't know what the theory of standing actually was that they were using to block the suit, but they were leaning toward, I think, leaving the path open for members of Congress. And so I'm not surprised to see this go on. And it made sense to me because, of course, right in the Constitution, in the emoluments clause, on its face, the idea is that Congress can, if it wants to, affirmatively clear emoluments if it votes affirmatively to allow the president to accept some certain emolument for some reason, and I'm not clear on what reasons people might offer to allow things to go forward, but I'm sure extraordinary circumstances might one day exist, or maybe it's even happened before in the past, I'm not sure. But given that they've got the right to affirmatively okay the acceptance of emoluments, I think it would be a lot more difficult to dismiss their lawsuit if they were members of Congress and they held in their hands at least the power to affirmatively okay such a thing. Surely they could reject such a thing as well. So it made more sense to me that their claim would survive. Anyway, let's see. Time for us to head into our break. I'll just give you a few of the paragraphs up at the top, and then we'll turn things over to the impeachment topic. Federal Appeals Court rejected a Department of Justice request to dismiss a lawsuit filed by Democratic lawmakers accusing President Trump of violating the Emoluments Clause. A D.C. Circuit, in this case, ruled the administration did not show a clear and indisputable right to dismissal of the complaint, but did open the door to allow the DOJ to make a request for appeal again. So I guess we still haven't worked this one out. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let me tell you that the emoluments minefield, not that clear right now, but I do think did you take a look? Armando's with us now.
Yeah, you're right.
There was something, wasn't there?
There was a circuit court decision that said that the AGs did not have standing because the injury was too attenuated from them. And it's not a crazy decision, but the analysis in it is pretty bad. But I mean, the argument would be that if you were a hotel owner, perhaps you could argue that you're losing business. But as a state, saying you're losing revenue because some hotels in your state aren't, it's like 2 steps. Whatever. I mean, standing is whatever they want.
Yes. So that was kind of an odd one. It was interesting to see it being filed, but I did think that the stronger case was likely to come from members of Congress who, are mentioned in the Emoluments Clause as having a role to play here. It would be a lot harder to dismiss their
I would warn you, though, remember that Trump judge, and that's why I got a little confused. The standing judge shot down a House case where they were complaining about the supposed diversion of funds to build the wall.
Yes, that's true, too. And I, although there at least I thought, well, I don't know whether I would have guessed it ahead of time, but after the fact was able to say, well, the House objects to something that, requires bicameral decision making, that might not be enough. I was present as part of the decision-making process versus, but even here, I mean, it's not that, although they weren't filing suit as the House, I guess, against, I don't know, who were the parties in the emoluments case? Well, we can dissect this another time.
The state of Maryland.
That was
the District of Columbia were the plaintiffs.
Yeah, but in this one here, where they're, where they haven't had their complaint dismissed, it says it's members of Congress who are suing. And so
I'd have to look that one up. I'm not familiar with that case.
Well, okay. I'll just have to put it on the record that this is happening and that there was one case that was dismissed at the appeals court level. And although I suppose it's possible they would appeal that, it doesn't sound like something that they seemed interested in appealing from the states.
Let's be clear.
The
whole nonsensical positioning on standing.
Yes.
And before we get to impeachment, there's a case where the Affordable Care Act is under attack. You know who the plaintiffs are? The state of Texas, and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And the United States government is not a party in that case. The government has filed an amici brief supporting the challenge to the Affordable Care Act.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Reversing the position. Now, you understand generally the Department of Justice's mandate is to defend all laws.
Yes.
It's got to be extraordinary for it not to be.
Right.
And, there was a whole to-do about defending or not defending DOMA back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
And it was a break when the Obama administration said, we're not going to defend it. Now, what they didn't do was argue against it either. They just sort of stepped back from it. Here, the Trump administration is arguing for the total repeal of the Affordable Care Act in that crazy case that puts Roberts on the spot. So, they have standing when they want. Remember the crazy immigration case, Texas? By the way, you know how Bill Barr hates nationwide injunctions? That guy in El Paso, I forget what his name was with an H. California came in and said, I don't want your stupid injunctions. You don't want it? You're going to get it anyway. So, they're very selective. Just as standing is very selective. It's all whatever, if the court wants to hear it or not.
Well,
it just is. Do not ever kid yourself into thinking there's rhyme or reason to standing jurisprudence, because there is not.
It's certainly pretty vague, and you'll find in it what you want to find there, and you probably know better how a case is going to come out just by looking at your panel. So, well, what have they done in the past? Have they bent over backwards? Do they avoid standing? Do they?
No, I would actually look to see who the parties are, and if they're Republican judges and it's a Republican lawsuit, they're going to find standing.
I think that's probably part of your calculus.
I got to be honest. I hate to attack the integrity of the courts in this way, but when it comes to these types of issues, that's just the way it goes.
But we'll do another week or two on standing one of these days.
We don't have to, but interesting.
For right now,
impeachment. I wanted to ask you more about the question of procedure, and I sent you that story that was tweeted out and what inspired me, Beutler. He criticized Nadler for privately, he's urging an impeachment inquiry.
What I have here is you sent me Kyle Griffin's tweet, but I did see Brian talking about these things over the weekend. So this tweet says, aides say that Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler has privately voiced support for impeachment proceedings against Trump. There's a Washington Post piece that accompanies it. Brian was also pointing out that I guess he made did Nadler appear on one of the shows over the weekend?
Yeah, no, he said that the Mueller report details high crimes and misdemeanors.
Yes, right. And then
use that phrase.
So everybody else was tweeting over the weekend like, gee, someone should tell the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee.
And that's why I wanted to ask about procedure, because we talked about it in the Al Green. One of the things that's mentioned in this story.
Okay.
Or is mentioned in a different story, is that Nadler and others were urging that the Al Green resolution be referred to the Judiciary Committee.
That's crazy, stupid idea. Some blogger.
No, I know you mentioned it of course, while it was going on.
But I'm totally wrong.
And that's why I'm drawing on you, because, Pelosi, people say she doesn't have the votes, but I ask you just as a procedural question there. She may not have had the votes to refer it to the Judiciary Committee. I guess would be the argument. We don't know. Nobody actually put that to a vote. It was only a vote to table or not to table, right?
Yes, they have the votes to do whatever the speaker says they should do. Most people who cast votes on that and voted to table it did so because they were like, what is this thing? How does it work? Tell me.
I agree. And I thought it wasn't the best presentation of the argument for an impeachment inquiry, but that's neither here nor there. My question, I guess, is procedurally, let's say Pelosi wanted to, but wanted to save the people, the red state ones or the whatever district ones, the people that supposedly she's protecting.
Yeah.
Isn't there a mechanism where they get to vote, say, I'm against this, but the Judiciary Committee can just open an impeachment inquiry? I know you've talked about it. I've asked you. You've tweeted about it. But just in a nutshell, does it have to go to a full House vote
to get a committee to open an inquiry?
An inquiry.
I don't think it does. I mean, what requires a vote is for the House to sign and say we're impeaching the president. Sure, articles of impeachment don't go to the Senate until there's a full vote of the House.
And they started a committee, too. At least they did in 1974. I mean, I was a kid, and I remember watching all the votes on the articles of impeachment. They voted on I think there were 3, and they each had votes.
Yes.
It was very dramatic. You know, as a little kid, you're just like, wow, this looks important.
Yeah, and in the committee that they did this. Yes.
Yes.
And, I mean, you would need a vote on the House floor if a resolution to impeach came up that, you know, if you wanted to send it to the House Judiciary Committee, that would require a House floor vote. I mean, they could handle it by unanimous consent or, you know, a voice vote if you want, but that's a different thing. It's still handled on the floor.
Obviously, because the Republicans vote
no. You wouldn't get it, but I guess you could ask. But all of that would be done on the floor. That's the real point. And in order to establish a select committee, or, you know, in other words, a special committee with a very narrow and specific focus that isn't a permanent committee, you can have that too, and say we're going to have a select committee for the purposes of investigating various offenses with an eye towards impeachment without, you know, whatever. But to establish a new committee would also require a House floor vote.
Why would we? There's no need for a new committee. Really,
no, but so if the question is, could Jerry Nadler on his own say tomorrow I am going to announce that, you know, whatever. They sometimes give
my committee will be voting on whether we should consider.
Right. We're going to have an impeachment hearing or an inquiry as to whether or not there should be an impeachment inquiry launched or whatever. Can he just announce the topic of a hearing and title it? Yeah. Yes. Does he need a floor vote for it? No.
Can he create an actual, you know, vote and say my committee is voting on whether we should open an investigation as to whether the president should be impeached?
I don't think that requires anything from the House floor, and I think it's within his prerogatives.
All right. And is there something in the House rules? There's certainly nothing in the Constitution that I've seen on it. It's not specific as to the process of impeachment. You know, it implies a vote, a majority vote of the House to vote to impeach the president.
Yes, actual articles of impeachment, yes.
You know, I mean, as I said, there's nothing in the Constitution about committees and things like that. So, I mean, the House has the power to investigate. Its purpose can be stated to be, the Judiciary Committee's purpose could be stated to be, this is an impeachment inquiry.
Yeah.
We're considering whether the president has committed high crimes and misdemeanors.
Yes.
Now, look, I don't just need the words, to be honest with you. And I understand people. I was there in the beginning. I thought that maybe the normal oversight might get you enough to push people over to it. But, you know, we've gone through this process where the Trump administration just isn't cooperating, and they're raising every sort of argument. And listen, we haven't even gotten to the tough arguments in court. You know, Trump has throughout this crazy, in the Mazars case, he's thrown out this in the Mazars case, which is the third-party subpoenas of Trump's accountants,
right,
and also in the Deutsche Bank case, that the House has no legitimate legislative purpose, ergo they can't subpoena these documents.
Right.
And, you know, it's a crazy argument. It's bizarre. It's stupid. And, of course, even this crazy, stupid argument would be completely eliminated by saying, oh, our legitimate purpose is we're considering whether to impeach you.
Yes.
Because that's a legitimate purpose. It's a constitutional purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the Constitution. It
Yes.
really is.
I assume that they would argue against it anyway and simply say, well, yeah, but it's not legislative in nature. And then they would argue about, well, anything the legislature does is kind of legislative in nature, but it doesn't create a law. I mean, I suppose you could head that off by saying, fine, we're having a vote on a resolution.
I don't know how a judge, but David, I don't know how a judge can say the Congress, the House, can't
a judge
investigate.
No. Well, shouldn't.
The question of impeachment. The Constitution gives it the specific and explicit power to impeach.
Right.
Certainly.
Mine is just being crazy. That you can do that.
At that point, then you're a banana Republican. You're done. I mean, forget it. There's nothing to talk about. Yeah. I mean, why then do we think that the
elections
are going to happen?
Right. Many people do. So,
Well, I
yeah.
understand that, and I used to say, "Oh, come on," and now I don't say, "Oh, come on," anymore. I say, well,
Okay, right. Fair
you
enough.
might be right.
Yes.
But my point is, the House is not using this. It could cut through this whole morass.
Yeah.
There would be no appeals, in my opinion, or they'd be expedited. You said, "Wait a second, you're saying the House can't impeach you?" But it's in the Constitution. When you say, well, show me in the Constitution where it says you can impeach me. Well, it's right here.
Yeah. No, it isn't. I don't know. I don't know what they would do with that. I should they be doing that? Yeah. The only excuse I've seen from
It's
more
to
than one
protect
source.
members.
Yeah. Right.
It's to
Or
protect
as people
members,
say,
right?
that and there's some discussion of, well, we too are afraid of the possibility of just insane judges saying nope for reasons, and then what do we do? And then it's like, well, now we have to impeach him because we're too far gone to do anything else, except we know the Senate isn't going to do it, and we just don't want to hasten the death of the Republic. Well, go ahead.
That actually hastens the death.
Yeah,
of the
right.
Republic.
Exactly.
Okay.
You're not helping us any. Go ahead, please kill it already, so we know what's going on.
I mean, we should know what we're dealing with, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So I guess just what I wanted to discuss was just procedural. And listen, by the way, the Mueller report, his testimony is coming. That could be important. I'm skeptical. I'm upset that the members of the Judiciary Committee don't see that a unified questionnaire, and I would take it out of the hands of all of the congressmen, so everybody gets equally deprived of the chance to preen. And just have committee counsel ask Mueller the questions. I actually think Mueller will be much more forthcoming to committee counsel. He's going to see it as less political.
Possibly.
I mean, it's so obvious to me.
I think it makes good sense.
But in that way, you get all the egos out, and you don't have to worry about people getting their time. And, of course, that's only half the time. And, by the way, I assume the committee could say, listen, we're going to divide this right down the middle. Our counsel's going to ask for the first hour and a half, and you and Meadows and Jordan can make fools of yourself for the second half of the time. I don't think the second half of the time with Jim Jordan acting like a fool will be very impactful, and in fact, you're going to give him more of a platform by having him go alternate. You know what I mean? This has not been strategized at all, and it's depressing, really, to me.
Well. Yeah, I understand the concern. They could structure it any way that they want, really. I mean, they have the votes for these things, assuming that if everybody was on board with playing hardball, you structure it any way you like.
Well, is that really hardball? It's just saying, listen, for the efficacy of the hearing, to get the information out, we believe that 90 minutes will be given to our committee counsel. You can use committee counsel too if you want, but we know Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows and those guys are going to want to grandstand because that's what they do. And Trump will like that. They all want to impress Trump. So they'll do their stupid show, which I think will be much less impactful than good, solid questioning by a ostensibly non-politician and, a counsel. Put that Doug letter up there to ask questions. If you want, I think, he's House counsel, but whoever the committee counsel is.
Yeah.
If you have a good litigator there, if you don't, hire one for the day.
Yes, that's another of the problems that Nadler brought up. We'd be so much further along, except for our counsel is tied up. Yeah, our counsel is tied, and interestingly, not only do we not have enough lawyers, our lawyers that we do have are tied up pursuing our cases in court, which actually is not happening. So
they had 3 cases in court that I was aware of, and not for nothing, 3 cases doesn't tie a lawyer up, or at least not a lawyer with staff. I mean, come on.
Yeah, you can get more.
And they're not factually intense cases. There's no fact disputes. This is my subpoena. They say that they don't have to respond to it for X reason. You write the brief, you argue it, and it's over. There literally isn't that. This is not some thing where there's a 20-day trial going on.
Yeah.
The facts are stipulated.
Yeah.
This is the subpoena. They say no. This is why they say no. We say they're wrong for this reason. And you go argue it. I don't buy any of that. There's clearly something else going on.
Yes. Well, I'm not certain what's happening. Unhappy with the way they're handling things. So is Jerry Nadler. I guess he's just stuck between rock and a hard place. Like, okay, well, if I can go rogue and just do this, of course, if it's true that there really is a significant majority of the House Democratic Caucus, which is paralyzed with fear over this and will do anything to stop impeachment from moving forward, they may just remove me as chairman. Although, that'd be terrible.
That'd be. I don't think that would happen. I think he has some power there. The question is, how do you insulate these people that Pelosi says want to be insulated? See, I don't buy that she's insulating people. I think she just thinks it's bad politics. And she says, I'll be the lightning rod for the base. They can all yell at me. But I think it's bad politics, and I'm going to go to the mattresses on this and fight all of you because I know more than you guys, and that's that. Now, maybe she does. Maybe she's right.
I guess.
But I do think it's her and Hoyer and the leadership. I think that they think it's bad politics to open an impeachment inquiry, which is crazy. And then but what always bugs me is they come up with these arguments that are ridiculous. An inquiry doesn't mean you end up voting out articles of impeachment. So you take 6 months doing an inquiry, and you develop these facts, and you write a nice long report, and you say, we find the president committed this high crime misdemeanor, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one.
Yes.
But we know that the Senate is a bunch of lackeys to the president. They say so here. Here are the public statements by all of them, saying they won't even consider it. So we're not going to vote it over.
Yeah, you could do that.
If you fear that. So it's just nonsense that they come up with. The problem that people have is they don't want to accept that Pelosi is the major obstacle to opening an impeachment inquiry. She just is. Now, there's this related point, though, which is the delay in the lawsuit. And there was a story in Politico a few days ago, I don't know if you saw it, explaining what they feared. They feared losing in court, right?
Yes.
It's one of their biggest fears.
Right.
And they'll lose it. If you really fear losing in court, you come out with your strongest legal arguments, it seems to me. And as I've said ad nauseum, the strongest legal argument is impeachment inquiry. It defeats executive privilege, which is going to be the big problem. Executive privilege gets tricky because the courts hate to rule against the president on executive privilege. And they like it all to be worked out. Okay, I'll give you a little this, I'll give you that, but not this. And generally that's how it works out. But obviously that's not how it's going to work out, nor should it work out with Trump. And he just, he doesn't send people there. I mean, Hope Hicks, who committed perjury, amazingly, considering she didn't testify about things that happened in the Trump administration. Yes, right. No, they blocked her. They said, no, she's not going to, the whole, we don't know where her office is, was a question that wasn't permitted. So of the few questions that were permitted, she lied about those. Yes, she's in trouble, but only if we do something. So, well, I mean, if she was in trouble, the SDNY would have done something. It seems to me, because she was participating in this scheme to violate the campaign finance laws. I mean, the SDNY, something happened there. Yes, the something vaunted really SDNY. Did. Well, they're not so vaunted anymore. I guess not. And so one by one, these things are falling apart. All these reputations are intact. Surely there's no memo anywhere that says you can't indict a sitting Hope Hicks. Apparently there is. Oh, well. How about the Trump Organization? They falsified records. To cover it up. Yeah, okay. They wrote checks to Cohen and included the tax bite on it to make him whole. I don't know. I don't know whether it has anything to do with apparently the limited immunity deals that they made or what. Well, what did they get for that? I don't know what they got in exchange for it, but I don't know. I don't know anything about it. Is it a public thing? Have we seen it? Do we know? Well, we've seen the documents, and everyone's sort of scratching their heads. Wait a second, you got these guys cold.
Yeah.
Bo Pigs had cold.
I mean, I thought they had some sort of limited immunity deal for what's his name,
Weisselberg.
But I
But
don't know
as
what
far
it
as I know,
means.
the organization itself did not.
Yeah,
Just so
yes.
if people don't know this,
But I mean,
corporations can be indicted criminal.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Maybe if SDNY thought can't build this case now because of
why?
Because of his limited immunity, and we would require his testimony to something that he just will refuse to testify to, and we blew it with our agreement. I don't know. I can't come up with any that or no one wants to see bit players brought down by this. We want the president, and we can't get him. So forget it. I don't know what drives this decision. We may never find out.
Well, the irony, of course, is that Elijah Cummings wants answers from the SDNY on what happened.
Yeah.
And guess what's going to happen with those?
I think that they will not answer those subpoenas.
I think they will not answer those subpoenas. They will,
and no one will. No one will be
prosecutorial discretion. And here we go.
Yeah. Well,
and we're back where we started. Basically, yes. They aren't giving you anything, and you're not suing anybody. So good luck.
Yeah. Well, I think that's likely the way it ends on this one. I am not certain why they could. I don't know. I'm not certain why there wasn't more discussion of what to do with Green's resolution, and it may have had something to do with the substance of the resolution, and everybody was like, it's dumb and poorly drafted, and I don't want that one to be the one to put things in motion. But at this point, take what you can get.
Yeah, and by the way, prior to the whole send him home or send him back thing, Trump had achieved his highest average approval rating in 8 months. So this strategy is really working well, this self-impeaching thing.
Oh, yeah, right. He's impeaching
it's showing
himself
up in the numbers.
right into higher approval ratings somehow. And, I think Green's process was underrated, and I don't know whether he knew what he was doing or not, but it doesn't matter. Here's a plan for what to do with a thing that the guy doesn't understand. I got it. There's plenty of people who could have told you this.
Maybe he did.
Maybe
listen, people talk about impeachment for a day, and you got 95 votes for not tabling it, so that's something.
Yes, that's true, and there have been some people since who have put out their statements that put them on record, and now are being counted among people who are willing to say they're impeachment supporters. And 95 is not nothing, and 100 is going to be almost half the caucus soon. So.
Right, and after Mueller, you're going to probably see 10 or 20 are going to tell, listen, I can't. Because as bad as the circus will be, he's still going to say, Trump did this, Trump did that, Trump did this, Trump did that, and it's going to be broadcast all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's going to put a lot of pressure on particularly safer Democrats who are, keeping mum now because Pelosi's told them to. So there's going to be more pressure after that if it's done well, but it's not going to be done well. But if say I'm wrong and it's going to be done incredibly well, or Mueller's going to be devastating to Trump.
Awesome.
Then you're going to get 50 more people, and there's going to be more than half the caucus. It's going to be 140, 150 who are going to be publicly for it.
Well, maybe that's what changes, and who knows? If it does change, then afterwards you'll be able to convince me that it was Pelosi's strategy all along. And okay.
Well, okay. Well, let's hope that's her strategy.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's her strategy, but let's hope it is.
Yeah. That's all we have to hope for, I guess, at this point. We'll see how this goes on Wednesday. I guess, as you point out, the fact that they haven't really worked out anything extraordinary procedurally doesn't argue very strongly for a real blockbuster of a thing. But maybe they can broadcast the show outside on jumbotrons everywhere and get everybody glued to it. make a
Oh,
public
it's going to be
event out
watched.
of it.
I think it's
Yeah.
going to be on. I think it's going to be on all the networks,
Sure.
and it'll get a lot of attention.
Yeah, I think you need people in the street watching in front of television store windows. Do we still have those? We got to
Well,
start.
hopefully it's not one of those heat wave days.
Right, yeah. Well, I'm going to start a chain of downtown storefront television shops so that we can have that same effect happening again. I think we're never going to get back to that. But people watch on their phones on the subway or something. Maybe that's the equivalent.
All right, Dave, thanks for giving me the time to
Sure.
go over that.
Well, it's on everyone's mind. Thanks very much for calling in and wanted to discuss that. Lots of people saw that over the weekend on the Sunday shows. By the way, lots of people saw Stephen Miller on the Sunday shows as well, and I just want to make the point that anybody who agrees to interview Stephen Miller on a Sunday show wants to get the answers that he got from him. Evasion and denial of everything and doubling down. You have to know that's coming, right? Okay. Well, Fox did it. That's what they got. Here's what you're going to get when you stay tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Wow, some stories here. Representative Elijah Cummings, of course, stated the obvious when asked if Trump is a racist, so that's good news. Trump has been quietly shutting down defense programs to protect Americans from terrorism. That seems bad. Lara Trump complained critics of Send Her Back are pushing a biased, racially charged narrative.
From
about
Daily
Trump.
Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Yes, in other words, you're the real racist. You see, Mike Pence's nephew is an embedded section leader who orchestrates Trump rally chants, in case you were wondering how that thing got started. And around the world, villagers and firefighters battle huge wind-driven wildfires in central Portugal. All of that and more coming up.